Good morning. It's great to see so many here for this wonderful day. My name is Bruce Roberts, and on behalf of the Board of Directors of the George C. Marshall International Center, I welcome you to our Independence Day program. A couple housekeeping items, and it looks like everybody is social distancing. We have the flags strategically placed to keep folks apart. We appreciate you're doing that. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for this program, the Bank of Clark County, AH&T Insurance, Loudon Mutual Insurance Company, Novec, the Ackerman family, and Mitchell and Company. There's, just as a reminder, there's water. If anybody needs something to drink, over by the table over here. And I'd ask you to stop by there and sign up. We're going to have a drawing for each of the Four Freedoms posters that you see mounted before us, and they're going to be the topic of today's talk. As we gather to celebrate the 244th birthday of our nation, please honor America with me with the Marine Corps League Detachment 1205 as they post the colors and join together afterwards for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
We really are thankful to have the West Point Glee Club with us today under the direction of Nancy Riley. They actually are West Point alum that live in the metropolitan area that all came together and said, when we asked if they would come and perform, immediately said they were glad to. So we really do appreciate them being here today. These really have been trying times for our country, for our county, and Loudon and Leesburg. It is a privilege to be able to host this special program at this meaningful place and this very important day. George C. Marshall's Dodona Manor represents the living legacy of a truly great American and world leader who in war and peace dedicated his life to defending and promoting the founding principles of the United States. I'd like to introduce Tom Greenspun, President Emeritus of the George C. Marshall International Center, who will lead the program today. Tom?
Good morning, everyone, and happy birthday to the USA. We welcome you on this Independence Day celebration, and while it's certainly been challenging in the 1 year since we gathered here for the 4th of July last year at George C. Marshall's Dodona Manor, we're thrilled that you're with us here and can enjoy the special day and the home and gardens of this truly great American. Today, I want to take us back to January of 1941. General Marshall's wife, Catherine, She had spotted this property a few months prior to January of 1941 when her husband, George Marshall, was the U.S. Army Chief of Staff with heavy demands on his time. She imagined that they would come out here for weekends and that it might become their permanent home after his tour of duty as the Chief of Staff ended. Even in the January cold, she was imagining summer flowers and what this place might look like today. General Marshall, however, he had little time available in January of 1941. He didn't have a lot of time to think about his new home in Leesburg, the first home that he had ever owned. His biggest task was to build an army because of the possibility that the United States might soon be drawn into a war on foreign shores. In addition to increased Japanese aggression across the Pacific, Hitler's Nazis were on the move in Europe, and not in a way of small coincidence. It was on September 1st, 1939, the very day that George Marshall was sworn in as the U.S. Army Chief of Staff, was the day the Nazis invaded Poland in what is broadly recognized as the official beginning of World War II. Since that time, the Nazis had overrun Luxembourg, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France had fallen. In the fall of 1940, Germany's Luftwaffe had bombed London for 57 consecutive nights and killed more than 48,000 Londoners. For a full year, the Brits stood alone against an existential threat. And yet the British government, under the leadership of Winston Churchill, refused to follow a course of appeasement or to negotiate a deal that had given Hitler a free hand in Europe. The United States faced a huge challenge because its army, its defenses, were exceedingly small. When George Marshall began his term as the Chief of Staff, the U.S. Army stood at only 175,000 men in those days and ranked 19th in the world, a smaller army than countries such as Portugal and Bulgaria. Despite that reality, as the new year began in 1941, General Marshall and Franklin Roosevelt understood that Britain was the last holdout against aggression in Europe, and Britain was desperate for help. However, many Americans remained committed to isolationism and the belief that the United States should stay out of the war in Europe. As conditions continued to get worse for our British allies, the president's resolve to keep us neutral was threatened. Marshall also struggled to balance the development of a stronger army with the clear need to use the scarce resources that our own army required, while also providing critical aid to Great Britain. The powerful industrial might of the United States had yet to be fully summoned. It was in those challenging circumstances that President Roosevelt delivered his annual message to Congress on January 6, 1941. In what is known today as the State of the Union Address, Roosevelt made the case that we, the U.S., had to increase our aid to Great Britain and to increase the production of war materiel. While the president talked of the sacrifices that Americans would face, including the possibility of higher taxes, he also said that our aid to Britain was broader than just support for that island kingdom. It was also related to the pursuit and guarantee of universal freedoms he felt compelled to acknowledge in this State of the Union address. And these universal freedoms should belong to all people across the globe. He also praised Americans as strong traditional believers in universal freedoms. In very simple language, he outlined 4 freedoms at the close of his speech. Although Franklin Roosevelt had a team of amazing staff, speechwriters, the best the country had to offer, he always edited, rearranged, and added to what they had written. And this particular speech for that State of the Union address in January of 1941 went through 7 drafts before delivery. The paragraphs at the end of the speech about the 4 freedoms did not appear until the 4th draft. And one night in the Oval Office, as he gathered with the team, he sat back in his chair and he had an idea for the closing section of the speech. He leaned back and dictated what would be known as the Four Freedoms. The ideas enunciated in Roosevelt's Four Freedoms speech were the foundational principles that would eventually evolve into the key concepts of the United Nations, which became a reality at the end of World War II. So now, I'll take a few moments and read just that section of the speech. And even away from the context of war, they ring true so much today, our Independence Day. In the future days, which we seek to make secure, we look forward to a world founded upon four essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his own way, everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which, translated into world terms, means economic understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which, translated into world terms, means a worldwide reduction in armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor, anywhere in the world. That is no vision of a distant millennium. It is a definite basis for a kind of world attainable in our own time and generation. That kind of world is the very antithesis of the so-called new order of tyranny which the dictators seek to create. To that new order, we oppose the greater conception, a moral order. A good society is able to face schemes of world domination and foreign revolutions alike without fear. Since the beginning of our American history, we have been engaged in change, in a perpetual, peaceful revolution, a revolution which goes on steadily, quietly, adjusting itself to changing conditions without the concentration camp or the quicklime in the ditch. The world order which we seek is cooperation of free countries working together in a friendly and civilized society. The nation has placed its destiny in the hands and heads and hearts of its millions of free men and women and its faith in freedom under the guidance of God. Freedom means the supremacy of human rights everywhere. Our support goes to those who struggle to gain those rights and to keep them. Our strength is our unity of purpose. And the president closed the speech with this statement: to that high concept, there can be no end save victory. These are strong words and themes, so cleanly stated in January of 1941 that we now consider them to be essential American values. It is only fitting that we gather to appreciate them on a day such as today, our 244th Independence Day. For President Roosevelt's purpose in 1941, this was clearly also a call to arms, and there were varying reactions to the message. A deep isolationist sentiment continued to exist throughout the country and in our institutions of government. So the question of America's direct involvement was never truly resolved. But the great debate ended, as we all know, on December 7th of 1941, not by an active choice or by some national consensus, but because a hostile act of aggression thrust Americans into war without their consent. In fact, not only did the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor 11 months after the speech, but 2 days later, Germany and Italy also declared war on the United States. Americans had to fight to protect these freedoms and their very lives, whether they wanted to or not. American painter Norman Rockwell captured the visual essence of the four freedoms in a series of works you have here today that were painted in 1943. Reproductions of these are here at Dodona Manor. The four freedoms were also the highlight of a war bond fundraising campaign that toured the country, raising more than $130 million, which is the equivalent of $2 billion in today's terms. These are perhaps Rockwell's best-known works, and the originals are on display at the Norman Rockwell Museum in Stockbridge, Massachusetts. Between 1916 and 1963, Rockwell created 322 magazine covers for the Saturday Evening Post, which at one time was the most widely read American magazine. As we conclude today's program, we wish you and your families a wonderful Independence Day and encourage you to come forward to take a closer look at the Rockwell series and where our Dodona Manor docents can answer questions about the paintings, about George and Catherine Marshall, their historic home, and how the great American who lived here focused every ounce of his personal energy into preserving these four freedoms. On behalf of our board of directors, I welcome you to enjoy visiting the grounds today and to return in the near future for a tremendous full tour experience. I also want to offer a special thank you to our sponsors, to Rachel Thompson, Tom Bowers, Howard Moody, and Valerie Bedoin for their fine work in preparing this program and their leadership in supporting the mission of the Marshall Center. God bless you, and God bless the USA. And we'll close with the singing of God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.